Okay, so breastfeeding. Now, I could go on for days about breastfeeding, so I'm just going to try and hit the high points and not talk about it endlessly. Um, so, there are some pros to breastfeeding, there's some cons for breastfeeding. Um, I want to focus, like I said, on mom. If you really want to understand baby development and stuff like that, take lifespan development. For mom, benefits for her. For one thing, the clamping down of the baby on the nipple causes the release of a hormone called oxytocin that actually contracts the uterus. It contracts all of the soft muscles. So it's good for mom's heart, which is a soft muscle. It helps to move her bowels, which are soft muscles, which a lot of times after moms give birth, bowel movements can be a problem. And it contracts the uterus. So after giving birth, one of the goals is to get the uterus back down into its smaller size quickly, so that you have less bleeding, less pain, things like that. And so it does contract the uterus. It boosts cortisol levels. Okay, now this is really an interesting finding. The placenta secretes cortisol throughout pregnancy, especially in that last trimester. Cortisol is a hormone that helps us to combat stress so we don't feel overwhelmed by life's challenges, things like that. So the placenta has been secreting a bunch of cortisol into mom's bloodstream for the past 9 months. When she delivers the placenta, suddenly she's lost this big source of cortisol. So about 3 weeks after delivery, her brain finally realizes, where is all that cortisol I have come to rely on? Everything is so stressful. I have no way to combat this stress. I remember on the third day after delivering my first child, I finally had the energy to look in my bags and things that I had brought home from the hospital, and I discovered that in her effort to help me, my mom had packed up the paperwork I had filled out for my daughter's birth certificate and her social security card and all that stuff that you're supposed to leave at the hospital. My mom had put it in my bag and it came home with me. And oh my gosh, that was like I was going to die. How am I going to cope? They're going to think that I stole the baby. I forgot to register the baby. I don't even have a receipt for this baby. How do they even know it's mine? I just was crying. I couldn't believe it. I was just overwhelmed. So my husband, he doesn't know what to do. He's like, I've lost my mind, obviously. So he calls the hospital and tells them what happened. And they said, that's fine. Just bring the paperwork down. Oh, I couldn't take it. Oh, a little bit later, I was changing my daughter's diaper and she was crying and I just would start crying with her. I couldn't stand it that she was crying. I was like, oh, my poor girl. I'm sorry. I'm trying to hurry. Things that had not been that hard suddenly became really hard. That's what happens when you don't have enough cortisol. You can't handle even the smallest stressor. Well, the beauty of breastfeeding is it triggers the production of cortisol. So that, yeah, even breastfeeding moms are going to go through what is called the baby blues. Even if you're breastfeeding, you're going to have that little transitional stage where you haven't started to make enough of your own through other avenues, your normal avenues. You're still missing what was in the placenta, but then you start to build it up faster if you're breastfeeding. It returns you back to normal faster. Oxytocin is not only contracts your soft muscles, but it also gives you that feeling of bondedness towards puppies and other cute things. You get a little dose of oxytocin when you see the little puppy. Same thing when a baby nurses. It causes the release of oxytocin and helps mom to feel protective and in love and wanting to hold the baby and thinking that it's adorable and all those things. And it also boosts serotonin levels, which helps to make us feel calm and content. So all the things that need to happen to help moms combat those those little baby blues that happen those first few days postpartum, breastfeeding helps to do. Of course, the negatives. It's not the world's easiest thing to do. It does lower your estrogen levels. So for all women, whether you breastfeed or not, giving birth is going to cause this drop in estrogen, like really low. If you breastfeed, it's going to stay really low, ongoing pretty much as long as you breastfeed. It puts you almost into a profile like you're postmenopausal, so that you really you can have vaginal dryness issues, can even, if you breastfeed long enough, you can even develop osteoporosis because of the low estrogen levels. So, I mean, it definitely lowers estrogen. Of course, breastfeeding, you know, it's a tough task, and it can cause what's called mastitis, where you have an infection in your mammary tissues, and it can be treated with antibiotics, but it's pretty horrifying. Anybody who has breasts out in the audience are thinking to themselves, "Yeah, I don't want that," right? There are cultural taboos. I'm making this lecture in July of 2016. It was maybe 3 weeks ago that a guy was videotaped telling a mom in Target that she shouldn't be nursing in the food court. You're disgusting, and all these things that he was yelling at her. In the U.S., we're like not really in love with breastfeeding. People out in public sometimes have things said to them if they're breastfeeding in public and things. But of course, how do you get rid of those taboos but to not be affected by them? And so it can be difficult. You don't want people looking at you and then it feels like they're looking at you and stuff like that. Or you stay home all the time, which is not really super healthy for mom either, right? She needs to get out. It's time consuming. In the postpartum period, when you've got this brand newborn, they have teeny tiny bellies. They're not used to eating. They might eat every hour and they might struggle to breastfeed so that it takes, like, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes to feed them. You're like, can I have a second when I'm not nursing this baby? And then as the baby gets older, you might think of wanting to return back to work and things like that, but you know that it's good for the baby to be having breast milk and stuff. So you think, well, I'll pump at work. Well, that's time consuming. It is time consuming. And moms oftentimes feel like they have to always be with the baby. They never get an opportunity to be apart. One thing I'd like to say about that, and this is a little bit of a lifespan development comment, but I would just like to argue that moms who are breastfeeding are wise to pump some breast milk every day and have dad feed at least one bottle, or have another caregiver feed at least one bottle during the day, because you never know if there's going to be an emergency or a need where you have to be separated from your baby. God forbid you have to be hospitalized or something and you have to be away from that baby. If they're used to taking a bottle, it'll be a lot less traumatic for the baby and whoever's taking care of them when you're not there. I was very spoiled with my first child because I was in graduate school when I had her, and I pretty much took her to class with me. Nobody cared. I didn't ask what they thought. I just took the baby to class, and if she got fussy, I'd take her to my office because I was a graduate student. But one day, it was time for my oral comprehensive exams, which is a really long and punishing exam where the faculty can ask me whatever they want about a 14-page single-space list of things that I read. And so it took I was probably away from her for about 5 hours, and I really had never been away from her at all. And she was about 3 months old at this time. And so I left her home with my husband, and I got home, and he was about to rob a bank or anything to try and make this baby stop crying. It turned out that I hadn't pumped any milk. It never had even occurred to me. And so I just left her home with formula. I'm like, if she's hungry, she'll eat, right? No, she did not like the bottle's nipple. She did not like what came out of the bottle's nipple. She did not like any of it. And so she just proceeded to cry. And then poor him, he didn't want to take her for a walk because all the neighbors would hear her crying. And so he was just trapped in the house with this crying baby. So the time consumingness is not just the times that you're, literally breastfeeding, but it's the other stuff that you have to do to plan to be able to, go somewhere or do something ever without the baby. So it's something to think about. Just so with my second born, you better believe I pumped all the time and made sure that he always got something else to eat, so that I was not, I did not want my husband to be under that kind of stress if I had to be out of the house. I was not as lucky with him. I had to work when I had him, and so he had to learn how to eat something else. So those are definitely there are pros very much for her health, and then there are also some deficits as far as lifestyle and things like that, and possibly some health related things too. All right, so when does fertility return after the birth of a baby? Well, about 7 weeks after giving birth, typically a mom will have her first ovulation. If she's breastfeeding, it probably will be delayed, but just because a mom is experiencing what's called lactational amenorrhea doesn't mean she's not ovulating. When moms are breastfeeding, when they're lactating, they oftentimes don't have menstrual periods, but that doesn't mean necessarily that you can rely on not ovulating. A lot of women have babies closer together than they were intending because they thought that breastfeeding was a birth control method, and it is not a birth control method. You need to use some other kind of birth control pretty much as soon as sex returns, right? I mean, you shouldn't think that there's some kind of window of invulnerability. I mean, as soon as sexual activity resumes, use birth control unless you're wanting to potentially become pregnant. Another thing that comes up, I mentioned the baby blues, which everybody goes through. Everybody goes through it, so it's not a disorder. Everybody has those changes of hormone levels, the cortisol and this and that makes them teary and more emotional in the days following. Usually it starts on day 3, and for most women it resolves itself within 4 weeks, 6 weeks at the outset. But for some women, it moves on into postpartum depression. And Brooke Shields took a lot of grief from Tom Cruise for talking about her experiences with postpartum depression and the medical treatments that she took. She took Zoloft initially, and then I think she switched to something else to deal with the postpartum depression. And it's serious. She was having ideas about wanting to kill her baby and things that, she couldn't live like that. And a mom shouldn't have to feel embarrassed or worried that people will judge them. Hormonal changes can trigger depression. And so it's a serious thing. And usually you have to have had the symptoms all day, every day for 2 weeks before it would be diagnosed. And that's actually kind of a good thing because, like I said, a lot of women who have the baby blues move a little bit into depression, but then it resolves itself and they get better on their own. But for some, it spirals and becomes worse. And so medication can really help. And then medication sometimes is prescribed if you become pregnant again, so that when you give birth, you're in a less vulnerable position. But recent studies have been suggesting that that might actually be harmful for the developing baby, that it might be linked to autism and other kinds of things. And so it's something to really, just because you had postpartum depression with one birth doesn't mean that you will for another. Just because you didn't with one birth doesn't mean you won't for this one. I mean, it's really, each pregnancy is separate and different. And so there's no way to sort of know what's going to happen. But it definitely is a serious thing. And it definitely is treatable. And I just felt so bad for poor Brooke Shields, who talked about it, wrote a book about her climb out of the depression and being able to fall in love with her baby and feel the things that she wanted to feel about her baby. And then she got attacked by Tom Cruise for buying into the pharmaceutical industry's desire for her to be on antidepressants and stuff like that. Pretty hardcore. All right, let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about what if you can't get pregnant when you want to.